This conference will now be recorded.
In previous session, we were discussing about what is variable, especially input variables, variables, variables in Terraform. That is especially input variables using variable block, followed by your variable name, we can define or we can declare variables, and we can define the type, what type of variable it is, the default value for that variable, if required a description, and if required validation, that the message and the condition on what basis it has to be validated. You can define a variables, and we were discussing about the different types of variables, right? There are categorized into two things: variables, primitive types, and complex types. So primitive types and complex types. The primitive types are simple types. What type of variables we discussed already? The primitive types, right? So we discussed about string, and we discussed about number. We have something called Boolean also. And when it comes to complex types, we have maps, we have list, we have map, we have set, and we have object, like this. And there are various ways we can assign a value to the variables. The first option we discussed, when it is prompted, right? We can give the values to the variables, that input variables. Otherwise, we can assign a default value using default argument in the variable block. If required, we can override that default values, or we can assign the values, or we can override the default values, or we can assign a values using various options. One option, -var option using a CLI, and environment variable option, and we have terraform.tf files, or any file name with the .auto.tf files. Terraform will automatically load the values from that variable definition files, terraform.tf file or terraform.tf.json file, or any file name with the auto.tf extension. Terraform will automatically load the variable from those load the values from that variable definition files. If you have a variable with a different file name, that variable file .tf file with a different name, you can use one option. What is that option? We can use for loading the values to the variables from that variables file. In the previous sessions, we discussed all these things. Hyphen var file. It is not variable equals to value. The file name. Option is correct. Var file or var file, but the file name, the variable file name. Suppose you have something like this. That file name, the variable declaration file name, which you can use, right? Now, I'll share this document with you guys. We already discussed what is input variables, right? How to declare variable, and when you are defining a variable, the name of the variable can be any identifier. The name of the variable, the name here, whatever you are giving, that variable name can be anything, but except few identifiers. your variable name. You can't have a variable with these names like source, version, providers, count, like this. These names you can't use as a names for a variable. These are kind of a reserved keywords in the Terraform. These are like a reserved keywords in the Terraform. You can't use these variable names as these names. But this can be any, the name of the variable can be any identifier except this following. You can't use variable names, whatever has been listed here. And you can define a variable using variable block, the variable name, the type of the variable, and the default values. We already discussed all these things. We have a string type, number type, boolean type. We'll come to this. We'll come to this complex type. What do you mean by list? What do you mean by set, map, object? We'll come to this. And we already discussed string variable. We already discussed about number variable. We can refer that variable using variable dot that var dot variable name. And I'll come to this complex type. We will discuss later what is list, what is set, form, map, like that. So we can assign a values to the variables in an interactive option. When user, I mean to say, Terraform will ask, the Terraform will prompt so that you can type the value that we discussed. And using default argument in a variable block, we can set the default value. Otherwise, we can assign values to variables or override default values individually with -var command option, or you can use variable definition files. This .tfvar files, either specified in the command line, or automatically loaded, or environment variables. So using -var option, also you can pass the values, or you can assign values to variables, or we can pass values to variables, or we can assign values to variables. Both are same using -var option. And this -var option can be used any number of times in a single command. If you want to pass or if you want to assign values to multiple variables, you can use this -var option multiple times in a single command also, which we already discussed. Otherwise, you can use .tfvar files. As I already discussed in our last class, to set a lot of variables, it is more convenient to specify their values in a variable definition file with a file name ending in either .tfvars or .tfvars.json, and then specify that file on the command line with -var option, -var file option, something like this. And also, right, Terraform can automatically, something like this. In your variable definition file, you can define a variable name and its value. It is like you are assigning a value here. And also, Terraform automatically load number of variable definition files if they are present. File names exactly terraform.tfvars or terraform.tfvars.json, or any file names ending with the .auto.tfvars. If variable definition file with custom name, then use -var file option with CLI. And another way is environment variables. You can pass the values to these variables using all these options. This is what we already discussed. I hope you guys practiced all these topics, whatever has been discussed in the last sessions. We discussed so far all these things. I hope you guys practiced all these ways. Now, before I go for other type of the variable, let's understand the precedence, variable definition precedence. There are multiple ways we can pass values to the variables, but a Terraform will prefer in what order? Terraform will prefer in which order? Terraform will load the variables in what order? If there are multiple ways you have defined a variable or passing, what will take more precedence? What will take more precedence? That is very, very important, right? There are n number of ways you can pass values to variables, but which one will take the more precedence if you are using multiple options? As I already discussed, the above mechanism, for setting the variables can be used together. The above mechanism for setting the variables can be used together in any combination. In any combination, if the same variable is assigned multiple values, if the same variable is assigned multiple values, Terraform uses the last value it finds, overriding any previous values. So loads Terraform loads the variable in the following order. Terraform loads the variables in a following order with the later sources, taking the precedence over earlier ones. Are you guys able to understand what I'm trying to say? You have something like this. Just to give an example, you have defined a variable. Just to give an example, let's take this variable ec to count, and you have variable type string or number basically. Now this value you can pass different options, right? In terraform.tfvars files, I can have this value ec to count equals to 1 like that. As an environment variable also I can set export tf underscore var underscore something like this. Here I am saying 2, just to give an example. And you have one more option. You are passing like this, and you have something auto vars. Let's say you have something like just to give an example, something that tf dot auto dot tf vars. You have in this you have something else. Variable name is same, but you are passing in a multiple ways together. And you have at execution you can say terraform plan or terraform apply. This time I can use this -var option. Let's say I'm saying value as 4, and I have something else. Like dev.tf vars. Here I have something else, something like this. You are assigning a value to the same variable. If the same variable is assigned multiple values, Terraform will use the last value it finds, overriding any previous value. Terraform will load the variables in the following order, with the later sources taking precedence over earlier. Now, Terraform will load the variables in a following order with the later sources taking precedence over earlier ones. So just to give an example, as per that explanation, can you guys tell me, suppose which one will take the precedence now? Now this is one variable. I am exporting like this, but I have this file also, and I am at the runtime I am passing like this. Now what will be the actual value? For this variable as per this order? Here itself you can understand. The Terraform loads variable in the following order with the later sources taking the precedence over earlier ones. Now here I have set 2 in the terraform.tf where also I have if present this one, if this is also there, and you have something called auto.tf wheres, then over this one this will take the precedence, over this one this will take the precedence, over this one this will take the precedence, and over this one this will take the precedence, and most importantly this one -var or -var option in the command line in the order they provided, in the order they provided. Now if I have this one also, if I have this one also, let's say here I have something like this, just to give an example. Here I have something like this. Now here I am using this option, but I am not using -var option. Even though I have file with this one, which one will take the precedence? Since I am not using here, even though you have a file like this, because this is a custom file, this will take the precedence. Now let's say if I have this one also, if I have this one also, just to give an example, now which one will be the value? What will be the value? The same variable assigned here. So this will take the precedence. But here if I just shift the order, if I just shift the order, then here something like this. But here it is 5, then here it is 4. Understand the last statement. -var and -var file option on the command line in the order they provided. So this will take the precedence if you are doing like this also. Just to understand, I have explained this variable precedence, but you are going to define some or the other ways, but you can use combination also. Is everyone clear? What is the variable precedence in Terraform? Right? In the interviews also they may ask these type of questions. So the above mechanisms for setting the variables can be used together in any combination. If the same variable is assigned multiple times, Terraform uses last value it finds override any previous value. The Terraform loads the variables in the following order with the later sources taking the precedence over earlier ones. Is everyone clear what is a variable precedence? This is going to take more precedence than all these things. Clear? Any confusion, any doubt here? Let me show practically also. Let me show practically also if you can understand. Let's take very simple. Let's take very simple. Let's create only less resources. Let's create only less resources only. Let's say here. Let's say here. Guys, you can understand this order, right? If you are not passing this one, if you are not passing this one, if you have this one, if you are not passing this way, then if you have this auto.tfr files, it will prefer this one over above ones, over above ones. Even though you have this one, even though you have this one, and you have this auto.tfr files over all these options, this one will take the precedence. But even though you have this one, you are passing something like this one will take the precedence. That is what the meaning. The Terraform loads variables in the following order with the latest sources taking the precedence over earlier ones. Now let me take very simple example only. Let me take very simple, don't need to take complex, sir. I have a Terraform. and let me provide the provider information. AWS profile Terraform profile region. Let's say, guys, you can use variables here also. You can use variables in the provider block, but you can't use variables in the Terraform block. Understand one point. You can't refer here. You can't refer variables in the Terraform block. You can't refer variables, but in the provider block you can refer variables. Suppose I don't want to hard code the region. I don't want to hard code the region. I can refer it as a variable also. I can refer it as a variable. AWS underscore region like that, right? I can refer this as a variable. If required, can I pass this variable? I mean to say, can I assign value to this variable also? Ideally, when we should use hyphen vars, right? Hyphen var option is there. There is no hyphen vars. Hyphen var like this. If you want to override some default, you can use, if it is one value, you can pass like this. Hyphen var. It is not hyphen vars. Hyphen var. You can pass like this, whatever AMI ID. I already discussed. If you have a lot of variables like this, the more convenient way is this one. More convenient way is this one. And even though you are doing, you can pass something like this. Single or multiple. Whatever works for you, you can use. But what I am trying to say, if you are having a variable, you are defining, you are assigning a value to same variable multiple times, then which order it will take the precedence? That's what I am explaining here. You are not going to use all these options, but in case same variable is assigned multiple times, in what order it will take the precedence, we are discussing here. It is not like you are going to do this way, this way, this way. You are going to use any one of the way, but even though you have all these ways, if present, if present, if present, which one will take the precedence? That is what I am discussing here. Now let me take very simple one. Let me take very simple one. I am going to create a resources now. Resource. Let's take AWS instance. Let's take AWS instance. Let me give something like demo server like this. AMI. I don't want to hard code AMI. I can refer it. I can refer it from variable. And I don't want to hard code instance type. I don't want to hard code instance type. If required, I can refer this also from variable. Instance type, something like this. Something like this. But you need to declare first and count. Count. If required, you can, instead of hard coding, you can refer from variable. And also suppose availability zone. If required, I can refer from variable. But without defining variable, can I refer the variable? If you see, I have not defined variable with this name, which I am using in the provider block. I have not defined the variable with this name, this name, this name in this module. Can I refer this first of all? No. If I try to run, it will fail, right? Let me show that. Let me go to the command prompt. Let me go to that command prompt. Let me open here Terraform init. If you want to initialize Terraform init, you can initialize. Now you can set Terraform plan like that for planning or applying. but you will get variable with that name not found, not defined like that. You are saying an input variable with name AWS has not been declared. First you need to declare. First you need to declare a variable, then only you can pass or assign. That is very basic concept, right? Now you can define a variable. You can define a variable using variable block, whatever. I can say this one type string. If required, you can assign a default value. If required, you can assign a default value. Not only this one, variable, availability zone. This variable name can be anything, type, string, whatever. If you want to assign default value, you can assign. Now AMI ID, variable, that image ID, that image ID. So here I am referring, right, that type, string. If required, you can set the default, but you can change also whatever you want to change. So let me take some image ID, that can be any Linux. Let me take some image ID. As a default, as a default, as a default. Let's take something as a default value. You have this value and one more variable, which whatever I am referring, variable easy to count this variable. I can say type of the variable number. I can say default. I can say default if required. Now I am passing like this. I have a default values, but I don't have that terraform.tfvar file. I don't have that auto.tfvar file, or I don't have a custom file. Now I am not using anything. Now when I say Terraform plan, is it using the default values? Instance type I have not defined. Instance type I have not defined. Let me define that variable also. Instance type variable, type string. Again, whatever you want to set. Whatever you want to set. If you don't set, you need to somehow pass. Let's say instance type I have not set. I have just defined the variable, but there is no default value. Let's say this I have to define. Let me define in the main.tf file. 1 second. I'm editing in a wrong file. I'm editing in a wrong file. 1 second. Let's say the instance type. I have just declared the variable. There is no default value. But now let's see Terraform plan. Since I have not set any default value, and I am not using -var option, and also I don't have a tfvar files. I don't have a .auto.tfvar files. Is it asking the value for this instance type? Because there is no default value, and there is no -var option I am using, and I don't have the terraform.tfvar files, and I don't have auto.tfvar files. Like that, it is asking. Let's say, let me give if required. Let me give if required, but this is not going to work out. Human interaction is required. Now it is going to use this one for this variable, but other, is it using the default values? I am just execute a Terraform plan. Is that AMI, that image ID, is it using default value? And instance count, only one resource, only one instance. This is the default availability zone, the default region. All these things are default. Now let's say default value. Let me assign default value for this one also, like this. Let's understand step by step. Now I'm using a default value. It will not prompt first of all. I'm executing again Terraform plan. It is not prompting for anything because everything has a default values and I am not passing anything. Is all these things are used default only? The image ID is the default value of that variable. The availability zone also, the default value of that availability zone variable. Instance type also, the default value of that instance type variable. And count, instance count also the default, only one resource to add. Now, let's say I will do this. Only for this variable, I am saying export tf var underscore ec count, that ec2 count equals to 2. Now, if required, you can set for others also. If required, you can set for others also. Let's say what I can do. Let's say now availability zone also. I'll export one more environment variable, one more variable, that is this one, availability zone. Let's say export tf underscore var underscore that I'm saying AP South 1B. Just imagine you are doing like this. Now, what is the value it will take when I am trying to apply or when I am trying to plan for this availability zone? What will be the value? Is this is the value it is going to take, or this is the one which is going to take when I say Terraform plan or apply now? Let's say Terraform plan only. For this one and this one, what it is taking? Let's see. Now, instance count is 2. Because of that, is it taking, I mean to say, is it creating two resources like two instances? This one as well as this one. And availability zone variable also. What is the value which has taken? Which one has taken now the precedence? This one. This one. Now let's say if you have something like this, even though you have set the environment variable, if you have something like this, in which you have a different values, which one will take the precedence? Let me show that also. Let me create one file. Naming terraform.tfvar files. tfvars. Now, whatever you want to assign, you can assign. Let's say, just I am saying EC2 count 3, just to give an example. Now, availability zone. Let's say you are saying AP South 1A again, like this. But if required, you no need to set this one also. If you don't set this one in the tfvar files, if you don't set the tfvar files in that variable, is it going to use whatever we have set earlier, the environment one? Is it going to use this one, the environment one? If I don't have in the tfvar files that variable, yes. Let me show that. I'm just executing Terraform plan. I'm executing them just Terraform plan. Now you understand 3, because here in this terraform.tfvars, this is assigned, this took the more precedence over earlier one. Even though I have set environment variable EC2 count 2, which one took the precedence now? this terraform.tfvars, terraform.tfvars. But here this environment variable AP South 1B, because here I have not changed anything. Here it is not changed anything, availability zone, that one. But remaining it is taking from the default. Remaining it is taking from the default. But let's say here you have overridden image ID. Let's say you are going to use different image ID. Let's say you are going to use different image ID. So this one will take the precedence than whatever earlier ones. This will take the precedence over default environment, over environment, this one. I hope you can understand. I no need to explain all these things. If I from reading the documentation itself, you should be able to understand. Now I'm just executing Terraform plan. I have a tf-var files. Do you see, is this AMI ID is used? Whatever has been defined in the Terraform tf-vars over the default value? Yes. And even though I have set environment variable for EC2 count, even though I have set the environment variable way for EC2 count, which one is taking the precedence for that EC2 count? Even though I have set the environment variable, which one took the precedence? Terraform.tfvars. Now, if you have something like this, over this, it will take the precedence. Now let's say I am doing something like this, Terraform plan -var EC2 count 4. Now the default value is 1. In the environment variable I have set 2. In the tf-var files I have 3. Now I am doing something like this. Which one will take the precedence now for that variable which I am passing? Over this one. I hope you are clear now. You are going to use, you can use any one of the options. Even though in your variables file, even though you have a variables file, let's say I create one variable file like this, dev.tfvars. Now here I can define all these things, availability zone, whatever, AP South 1A, you can say EC2 count based on your requirement. You can say instance type T2.medium, let's say. Now what else we have? The region, the AWS region. Let's say the region itself I am saying now AP South 1, AP South 2, AP South 2A, instance count is 4, image ID I am not passing. Now if I have this value, since in the variable block itself, I have not hard coded the region. Now if I apply this resource, whatever resource I have defined here, this resource will be created in which region using whatever values I am passing. If I use this file, under which region it will create? AP South 2. Because in the provider block I have referred this one and I have defined that variable also, but there is a default value. It was using AP South 1, sorry, this one, region AP South 1. Now if I use this one, it will use all these things if required. But image ID I am not passing, you may get an error. Terraform plan, let's say var file that dev.tf I am using. Let me show you. Terraform plan I am just executing just to see the values. Now if you see, is it using that tf files? You can see here, right? 4 resources are getting created. 4 resources are getting created. Availability zone AP South 2A, T2.medium, T2.medium. What else we are referring in the resource block? What else we are referring? Count 4 resources, T2.medium, 2A. Image ID, we have not defined in this value, in this values file. It is going to take the default values. It is going to take the default value because in this tf file I have this image ID. Okay, it is taking this one. In the tf file I have an image ID. So if you see that image ID, it is taking this one. I hope you can understand the precedence, variable precedence now. Now if I try to apply, it will use the variables and it is going to create a resources. But I may get an error because image ID might not be correct image ID in the Hyderabad region. When I try to apply, you may get an error because this image ID is not a correct image ID in Hyderabad region. So let me switch to Hyderabad. Region and let me find out. If you guys understood the concept here, can I reuse my Terraform configurations? Can I make my Terraform configurations composable and reusable using this variables concept? Instead of modifying your code, modifying your Terraform code, can I reuse my Terraform configurations, or can I make these Terraform configurations composable and reusable like that? Now, if required, I can set this one also like this, image ID like this. Now this will take the precedence for image ID like this. Now let me apply. But Hyderabad region I have activated, guys. Hyderabad region I have activated. I may able to create a resources in Hyderabad region. But let's see what it is saying. Unsupported. What it is saying unsupported, right? The requested configuration is not currently supported. Hyderabad region. Maybe I have some issues with Hyderabad region. Let me see. Is that Hyderabad region is enabled? EC2 instance as unsupported. So in Hyderabad region, it is not working. This one, let me see. Is this Hyderabad region? I can create a servers first of all. Let me go to service limits. Let me go to this limits. Let me search for. You can see here I may not able to create resources here. There is a service limits. Okay, that is fine. Let me change this to Mumbai region only. So I can say even though in this tf file I have AWS region as a AP. Let me change this in the tf file itself. Let me change this. So in the tf files, let me say AP South 1 Mumbai region. Let me see, Hyderabad region. AP South 1, I'll say, and AP South 1A or 1A or 1B, whatever. Let me apply this. In Hyderabad region, I am not able to create a servers because there is a limitations in Hyderabad region. Even though I have enabled, there is a limitations. But let me show that. Now I am creating in a Mumbai region only. Now in multiple locations I have set the values, but this is taking the precedence over all these earlier ones? Over all these earlier ones, the environment variable over this one, this is taking the precedence in whatever order you are passing? Now if required, I can demonstrate in a Singapore region also, but I hope you understood the variable precedence. Now default value is there. I have set environment variables also. In the TF-var files also I have assigned values, same variable multiple times, but over all these things, this is taking the precedence. Is everyone clear? Variable precedence? Or any doubts, any confusion still? Now let me destroy whatever has been created. Let me destroy whatever has been created. Let me destroy. Once your understanding is done, let's destroy whatever resources has been created. So this is what a variable precedence. This is what the variable precedence. So even though understand this document itself, the above mechanism for setting variables can be used together. Above mechanism in the sense all these ways. You can use environment variables, you can use variable definition files, right? You can use above mechanism for setting the variables and can be used together in any combination. But if the same variable is assigned multiple values, Terraform will use the value as per this precedence. Later, sources will take the more precedence. This is going to take the more precedence over all these ways. Now let's destroy. Let's destroy once you understood all these things. Now let's understand a Boolean type. Let's understand a Boolean type. So Boolean variable. So far we guys understood. So far we guys understood one variable types like string and number. We have something called Boolean, and I can use those Boolean values in a conditions also. Let me tell you something like this. Now here I am using something like this. I can use conditions also here. Something like this, where I can define a variable, something like this, create instance as a Boolean value, create instance as a Boolean value, and if that condition is satisfied, then you can assign some value. Condition based. You can have a conditions, right? We can call it as a conditional expression. You can call it as a conditional expression. Just to give an example, that Boolean type, you can define some kind of a Boolean value. And this condition, so many times you might have observed the code like this. This might be hard coded, something like this you might have observed, right? So if you are already working on Terraform, at least did you observe these type of things in most of the places? Someone was asking in the previous sessions. I don't know who asked this question. I think Aravind asked this question. Sir, what is this? Sometimes you see something like this. What is this? This is one condition. If value is true, if this condition is true, this is the value assigned to this variable. If it is false, this is the value it is assigned to variable. Now let's say I have a variable, variable create instance. I'm saying boolean, bool actually. I'm saying false. Just to give an example, default value is false. Default value is false. If required, you can give a description. Now this becomes false. If this becomes false, this is the value assigned to this variable. Now, even though I have a resource definition, the default value is false. So if this is false, this is the value. This is the value assigned to this variable. Even though I have a resource definition, do you think EC2 instance will be created now if I plan or if I apply? If I plan or if I apply, do you think this is the default value? This becomes false. If this is the false, this is the value assigned to this count variable. Understand what I'm trying to say? If this is false, this condition becomes false. This is the value assigned to this variable, this meta argument. Now this is false only the default. Now when I say Terraform plan or Terraform apply, is this EC2 instance will be created using these arguments? Because count is 0. Count is 0. Is the EC2 instance will be created because count is 0? The meta argument count is 0. Yes, question. I am asking a question. As per your understanding, yes, no, be proactive. I am asking question here. So I have a variable like this boolean value false. If this condition, this is like a condition, and you can use some kind of a complex expression also here. You can use some kind of a complex expression also here. So, complex expression also here. Now I am using a boolean value here, and the default value is false. If this is satisfied, this is the value assigned to this variable, and if this condition is satisfied, this is the value assigned to this variable. You can use some kind of a conditions also, guys. You can use some kind of a conditions also, like a string conditions also, but string type also you can use. String type also you can use, but this is type variable. One second. This is type variable. Type, sorry, type is boolean. The default value false. If required, you can say something else like type is a string. Type is string. Just to give an example, you can use something like this also. Type is string, default value yes, like this in a double quotes. But this is string type. But here, if you use these type of things, if you use here, this is a string type, right? This is a string type, and it will not work. This is going to expect either true or false. But if required, you can use this in a condition also, like this. If this is yes, if this is yes, if this value is a yes, then if this value is yes, the condition becomes true, kind of a string comparison. This value will be assigned. Let's say this is no, this is not going to be satisfied. The result of this comparison becomes false, then this value will be assigned. But if required, directly you can use a boolean values also. Directly you can use a boolean values like true or false, like this. You no need to again use lot of complex expression. If this is false, because you are directly using a boolean value, this value If this is true, this value. Now let me run. Let me say Terraform plan. I have destroyed already whatever has been created. 1 second. This is default. Now Terraform plan. Terraform plan. Now, even though there is a resource definition, it is saying your infrastructure matches the configuration. There is no difference because this count, we are using some kind of a condition. Now, this is the default value. But if required, can I use something like this? -var at runtime also I can say, or in this file also you can define. In this file also you can define. In this file also you can define if required. You can say something like this. This will be used. This will be used. Let's say -var file dev.tf vars. Just plan only I am doing. I am not applying because that condition is satisfied. The condition is satisfied. This is true now. Now because of that, what is the value for this variable it is assigning? Whatever we are using here. That is 1. That is 1. Otherwise, you can refer something like this also, guys. Easy to count. But these type of complex operations, you can use some kind of a local variables also. You can use some kind of a local variables also. The complex operations. Easy to count. This substitution may not work here in the variable, right? This substitution, if you see, this is kind of a substitution. Now if you see, this is taking 4. This is taking 4. You can hard code the value, or again you can refer this value. But now let's say I am saying -var that create instance. Here I am making it a true, but again if I am saying create instance equals to false like this, create instance equals to false like this, even though here you have that create instance as true, and again you are passing something like this, it is taking false. So this condition is not satisfied. What is the value assigned for this count variable for this resource? The meta argument value, how many count, how many instances like that? What is the value it is taking? 0. Because of that, is it saying no changes in your infrastructure, it matches your configuration like that? Yes. Now if I don't pass this one, and here you have some value that is true, that is taking the precedence. The variable precedence also I am explaining. At the same time I am explaining Boolean argument also. I am explaining Boolean variable also. That Boolean variable you can use in some type of conditions also. You can see here that is used here like this. Now let's say if I say Terraform plan, it is saying 4 resources to be created like that. And again at the same time, if I make this as a false, nothing will be created. Even though there are resources, nothing will be created. Let's say Terraform apply, it will create 4 resources as per that condition, as per that value. And again, these type of expressions are used in multiple locations. Then you can use this as a local block. Instead of repeating same thing multiple times, we can use locals, right? Locals, easy to count, something like this, count, something like this. count. You can use this one. You can refer something like this, local.count. Now, instead of repeating multiple expressions, the same type of expressions or values multiple times, can I do something like this? Can I do something like this? This I can refer multiple times also. This is locals, we discussed already. Local variables. Instead of repeating complex operations multiple times, complex variables or same variables referring multiple times, you can use a locals also. This is one more approach we already discussed, that locals approach. If you don't have this locals need, you can do something like this also. Now let me create. 4 resources are getting created because this condition, this is true, and since it is true, it is taking this value and assigning to count. If I make this false, the value will be 0. So it will not create any resources. These type of conditional statements you might have observed already in the Terraform configurations. Is everyone clear? Boolean type variable, Boolean type of variable also. Any questions, any queries? Whatever topics we discussed. Today we discussed about variable precedence. And also we discussed about Boolean type of variable. And there is complex variables. That we will start tomorrow. But I want you to understand all these things. List, map, set, object, like this. So this complex variables will start tomorrow, but play around with the variables today and variable files also today, and let's understand which one will take the precedence, whatever has been discussed today. Once your practice is done, you destroy. Once your practice is done, destroy your resources. Any questions, any queries before I wrap up the session? Variables are very, very important, guys. You need to understand the variables thoroughly, so that you can work with Terraform and you can reuse your Terraform configurations using variables. If we create more than one instance, then how we can destroy the particular instance that we wanted to do? What you do, right? You reduce the resource count. And run. Let's say Terraform. Guys, that is not all the valid use cases, okay? Since you are understanding, you may have a doubt. Why you need to delete only particular instance? You are not going to do like that, right? Since you are practicing, you may have all this doubt. Understand in real time. Are you going to do only particular instance, deletion? You are going to do everything, whatever, if you don't really need. Let's say I'm making this since EC to count as 3. As of now, there are 4. Let me say Terraform plan. As of now, there are 4. I updated that variable count as 3. Now what it is saying? Is it saying want to destroy? Which one is going to destroy? In the index one, starting from 0, is that last EC2 instance in that index, in the state. This is going to be deleted. Even though I say Terraform apply, it will delete that instance. Clear your question, Basoraj? If you want to reduce the number of instances of same type, you have a same configuration, same type. If you want to reduce the number of instances, you reduce the count and you run Terraform apply only. Is it destroying? But again, if you want to do within particular, that might not be a valid use case, but still you can execute Terraform destroy that resource local name. You can say Terraform destroy resource local name, whatever local name you are having, right? Like this, you can pass this resource name also, it will destroy. But without updating your configurations, if you run Terraform apply, is it going to create again? We already discussed this concept. Now you are destroying particular instance using Terraform destroy that resource name, but in the code you are not modified the count or that resources. If you apply again, will it create? Definitely yes. In the Terraform code, you have not reduced the count or you have not removed that resource block. You can destroy using this resource name, Terraform destroy, this particular resource ID also you can give. My question, if you run Terraform apply one more time, is that instance will be recreated? Yes. So whatever question you are asking, right, that is not a valid case. If required, you can still do that. If required, you can still do that. But without modifying Terraform resource code, if you try to destroy using Terraform destroy, again it will create if you apply one more time. That's why we are using all these things, right? You are going to use count or you are going to have a resource block. You will remove that resource block. The resource behavior. Go and understand the resource behavior. You have an answer for this. Now, if I want to destroy everything, I can say Terraform destroy. Terraform destroy. Simply, whatever has been created by that Terraform configuration, I can say Terraform destroy. All these things will be get destroyed. Any other questions before I end up the session for today? If not, try to play around with variables. Sir, is this variable will not work into other modules? No. How to pass variables to other modules, we will discuss when we start modules. These variables cannot be accessed in other modules. You need to pass variables to modules. How to pass variables to modules, that is child modules, we will understand when we start modules. Okay. Thank you guys. That's it for today. Practice whatever has been discussed, play around with variables. Tomorrow, I am going to start this list, map, set, and we will use some functions also. List related functions, map related functions we will try to understand tomorrow, and we will use this list, map, set, and we will use using this list or map type of variables. We will see we can create a VPC again, but we can reduce the number of lines to create a subnets. To create a subnets, I can define list of CIDRs for public subnet, list of CIDRs for private subnets, under which availability zones I need to create. I can define that a list of availability zones also as a list variable, and we will use those list complex type in tomorrow's session to create some kind of a VPCs or IAM users like that. List and map we'll discuss tomorrow. Thank you.